Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USCS Endeavour and watched the stars through the main window. His coffee had gone cold in his hands, but he didn't care. Space was quiet today, and that made him nervous. In 3 years of flying, between the stars, Jake had learned that quiet space usually meant trouble was coming. The ship moved through the darkness between 2 solar systems. They were carrying supplies to the human colony on New Terra. It was a simple mission that should have taken 5 days. They were on day 3 and nothing had gone wrong yet. That worried Jake more than he wanted to admit. "Captain," called Lisa Grant from her position at the communications station. Her voice was tight and careful. "I'm picking up something strange. On the sensors." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the screen. Green dots showed normal space objects like asteroids and gas clouds. But there was something else. A red dot that appeared and disappeared like it was playing games with their equipment. "What am I looking at, Grant?" "Unknown contact, sir. It keeps showing up for a few seconds, then vanishing. The computer can't get a solid reading on it." Jake felt his stomach twist. Unknown contacts in deep space were never good news. "How big?" "That's the problem, Captain. When it shows up, it reads as massive, bigger than anything in our databases." Before Jake could respond, every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. The lights shifted to red emergency mode, and the ship shook like it had hit something. "Solid! Report!" Jake shouted over the noise. "Unknown vessel just appeared off our right side," Grant yelled back. "Distance is 2,000 meters and closing." The main screen changed to show what was outside their ship. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The vessel that hung in space next to them was like nothing he had ever seen. It was black as the space. Around it, but covered in strange markings that seemed to glow with their own light. The ship looked like it had been grown instead of built. Curved surfaces flowed into each other like the hull was made of living metal. "Sir?" Grant said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're sending us a message." "Put it through." The screen flickered and changed. What Jake saw made his hand grip his coffee cup so hard it cracked. The creature on the screen was tall, easily 8 feet from head to foot. It had 4 arms, each ending in claws that looked sharp enough to cut steel. Its skin was black like its ship but covered in old scars. The most frightening thing was its eyes. It had 6 of them, arranged in 3 pairs, and they all glowed with intelligence that felt both alien and strangely familiar. "I am Kethvar of the Zephyrian hunting caste," the creature said. The ship's computer translated its words but couldn't hide the deep rumble in its voice. "I seek words with the species known as humans." Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was staring at the screen with wide eyes. First Officer Amy Rodriguez moved closer to his side. She was trying to look calm, but Jake could see her hand resting on her weapon. "This is Captain Morrison of the United Earth Colonial Ship Endeavour. What do you want with us?" The alien's mouth parts moved in what might have been a smile. It wasn't a comfortable sight. "Your species interests me, human. You have done something that has never happened before in the galaxy's history." "Which is what?" "You made the Hive Queens of Xerion retreat." The bridge went completely silent. Even the background hum of the ship's engines seemed to quiet down. Everyone knew about the Hive Queens. They were the monsters that lived in the dark parts of space, bug-like creatures that traveled in massive swarms and ate everything in their path. 17 star systems had fallen to them in the last 10 years. Humanity's fight with them at New Geneva had been desperate and bloody. Jake had been there, flying a smaller ship at the time. They had won, but barely. He never thought anyone else in the galaxy had paid attention to one small battle. "The Hive has never retreated from food before," Kethvar continued. "This makes your species valuable. It also makes you interesting prey." Rodriguez stepped forward. "Are you threatening us?" "I am studying you," the hunter replied. For 3,000 years I have tracked and removed threats to peace in the galaxy. Pirates who steal from trade ships, war criminals who hurt innocent people, machines that think they are alive and try to hurt their makers. I am what your people might call a bounty hunter, though your words are too small for what I do. Doctor. Carl Peterson, the ship's science officer, was typing quickly at his station. Captain, he whispered, if this is who I think it is, we're in serious trouble. The Zephyrians make the best hunters in the galaxy. They work for the Galactic Council when someone needs to be found and stopped. Kethvar's hearing was clearly better than a human's. Your Dr. Peterson speaks truth. I am the one your databases call the Shadow of Judgment. I have never failed to complete a job. Jake felt his crew's fear like a cold wind. What's your business with humanity? I have been hired to decide if your species is dangerous to the peace of the galaxy. Your fast growth among the stars, your ability to learn new technology quickly, your strange ability to survive when you should die, these things worry some members of the Council. And if you decide we're dangerous? All 6 of the hunter's eyes focused on Jake with the intensity of a predator watching prey. Then I removed the danger. However, I have watched your kind for 7 of your months. I have seen your tactics against the Hive. I have watched how you treat prisoners of war. I have observed your rules for meeting new species for the first time. The alien paused and seemed to consider his next words carefully. You fight not to conquer others, but to survive and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Engineer. Tony Walsh muttered under his breath from his station. Great, we're getting graded like we're in school. I have reached a conclusion, Kethvar announced. Humanity is not a threat to the stability of the galaxy. You are possibly its salvation. Jake felt like the floor had disappeared under his feet. What do you mean by salvation? The Hive Queens. That you defeated are not the greatest danger facing this galaxy. They are simply the most obvious one. I have spent years following clues that others ignore. There is something worse coming. Something ancient that has been sleeping in the empty space between galaxies. Rodriguez frowned. Worse than creatures that eat entire solar systems? Much worse. The Hive serves something else. Something that has been guiding events in this galaxy for longer than your species has existed. I have found evidence of careful planning, of technology that the Hive should not possess, and most worrying of all, the systematic destruction of any species that shows the ability to fight back effectively. Jake studied the alien hunter. Despite his fearsome appearance, Kethvar seemed genuinely concerned about something. You're talking about some kind of puppet master. An accurate comparison. The entity I have been tracking has been weakening civilizations across the galaxy for thousands of years, keeping them separated and unable to unite against a common threat. The Council itself may be compromised. How else would the Hive always know where our defenses are weakest? The implications of what the alien was saying slowly sank in. If he was right, then everything they thought they knew about the galaxy was wrong. So why come to us? Jake asked. Why not handle this yourself? Kethvar's mouth parts clicked rapidly, in what they were starting to recognize as bitter amusement. Because I am one hunter, and this threat requires an army. More than that, it requires an army that thinks in ways that no force in galactic history has ever fought before. You want to recruit humanity? I want to join humanity, Kethvar corrected. Your species has something that makes this ancient enemy nervous enough to change its plans. The Hive's recent attacks, the pressure on the Council to limit human expansion. These are signs that something is afraid. The command crew exchanged glances. This was beyond anything they had trained for. First contact with an alien species was one thing. Being recruited to fight some ancient cosmic threat was something else entirely. What exactly are you proposing? Rodriguez asked. A partnership. I provide information, analysis of enemy tactics, and access to weapons technology that Council regulations normally keep restricted. In exchange, I fight alongside your forces as we prepare for what is coming. Jake looked around at his officers. They all seemed to be thinking the same thing. This could be a trap. Or it could be the most important alliance humanity had ever made. And what do we give you in return? The chance to hunt the most dangerous prey in the history of the galaxy, Kethavar said simply. And perhaps more importantly, the chance to make sure that when this ancient enemy shows itself, there will be someone ready to fight it the right way. The bridge fell quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Jake realized that his decision in the next few minutes might determine the future of not just humanity, but every living thing in the galaxy. 2 hours later, Captain Jake Morrison sat in Conference Room Alpha across from the most dangerous creature he had ever met. Kethavar had to duck his head to fit through the doorway, and even sitting down, the alien hunter towered over the humans at the table. His 4 arms rested on the surface while his 6 eyes tracked every movement in the room. Commander Amy Rodriguez sat to Jake's left, trying to look calm. Dr. Carl Peterson was on his right, frantically taking notes on his tablet. Chief of Security Brad Collins stood by the door, his hand never moving far from his weapon. Everyone was trying to act normal, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. My study of your species is complete, Kethavar began, placing what looked like a small crystal on the table. Humanity possesses something that other species in the galaxy lack. Where most civilizations see impossible odds, you see problems to solve. Where others give up and surrender, you change your approach and keep fighting. Dr. Peterson leaned forward, his curiosity overcoming his fear. You mentioned that we might be the galaxy's salvation. What did you mean by that? The Hive Queens of Zerion are not the greatest threat facing this galaxy, Kethavar replied, using his secondary arms to gesture for emphasis. They are simply the most visible threat. I have spent decades following patterns and clues that others choose to ignore. There is something much worse coming toward us. Rodriguez frowned. Worse than a species that devours entire star systems? The Hive serves something else. Something ancient that has been sleeping in the dark, empty spaces between galaxies. My investigation has revealed coordinated attacks, technology improvements that the Hive could never have developed on their own, and most concerning of all, the careful elimination of any species that shows real potential for fighting back effectively. Jake studied the alien hunter carefully. Despite his fearsome appearance, Kethavar seemed genuinely worried about something. You're talking about some kind of master puppeteer scenario. An excellent comparison. The entity I have been tracking has been pruning the galaxy for thousands of years, keeping civilizations weak and divided. The Council itself may have been infiltrated. How else would the Hive continue to receive advance warning of our defensive preparations? Collins spoke, up from his position by the door. So why come to us? Why not handle this threat yourself? Kethavar's mouth parts clicked rapidly, and what they had learned was bitter amusement. Because I am one hunter, and this threat requires an army. More than that, it requires an army that thinks differently than any military force the galaxy has ever seen before. You want to recruit humanity, Jake realized. I want to join humanity, Kethavar corrected. Your species has developed something that makes the ancient enemy nervous enough to speed up its timeline. The Hive's recent aggressive behavior, the pressure on the Council to restrict human expansion into new territories, these are signs of desperation. Dr. Peterson activated his tablet and displayed a star chart on the room's main screen. What kind of timeline are we talking about here? Perhaps 2 of your years before the true invasion begins. The Hive was meant to weaken the galaxy's defenses slowly over many decades. Instead, your resistance at the Battle of New Geneva has forced them to reveal their hand too early. The room fell silent as the full meaning of his words sank in. Rodriguez was the first to speak. What exactly are you proposing we do? A partnership between our species. I provide intelligence about the enemy. tactical analysis of their capabilities, and access to weapons technology that Council regulations normally keep restricted to member species. In exchange, I fight alongside your military forces as we prepare for what is coming." Jake looked around the table at his officers. "And in return, we give you what exactly?" "The chance to hunt the most dangerous prey in the history of the galaxy," Kethvar said simply. "And perhaps more importantly, the chance to ensure that when the ancient enemy reveals itself fully, there will be someone ready to fight it using methods it cannot predict or counter." Collins crossed his arms and stared at the alien. "No offense, but how do we know you're not the actual threat here? One alien shows up out of nowhere claiming to be on our side, asking for military cooperation and access to our defense networks." Kethvar reached into what appeared to be a storage compartment built into his armor and produced a small device about the size of a human thumb. "This data storage unit contains the exact locations of 17 hive staging areas that your intelligence services have not yet discovered. It also contains the true identities of 3 members of the Galactic Council who are secretly providing the hive with classified information about galactic defense networks and fleet movements." He slid the device across the table toward Jake. "Verify this information using your own methods. Then decide whether my offer has genuine merit." Jake picked up the device and examined it. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own internal light. "And if we agree to this partnership arrangement, then the galaxy's most effective hunter becomes humanity's most deadly ally, and perhaps working together, we can ensure that there is still a galaxy worth saving when this ancient threat finally shows itself." Dr. Peterson looked up from his notes. "Can you tell us anything more about this ancient enemy? What are we actually going to be fighting?" Kethvar's 6 eyes focused on the scientist with predatory intensity. "Something that has been manipulating galactic events for longer than recorded history. Something that collects the knowledge and technology of every civilization it destroys. Something that has never encountered a species like humanity before." "What makes us so special?" Rodriguez asked. "Most species develop along predictable evolutionary paths. They become either purely logical, like the Andromedan Republic, or purely instinctual, like the hive swarms. A few develop emotional reasoning, but they usually lack tactical flexibility. Humanity is unique because you possess all of these traits simultaneously." Collins moved closer to the table. "You're saying we're unpredictable. I am saying that in 3,000 years of hunting, I have learned to predict the behavior patterns of every known species in the galaxy. I have been studying humanity for 7 months, and I still cannot consistently anticipate your tactical decisions. This makes you extremely valuable as allies and extremely dangerous as enemies." Jake turned the data device over in his hands. "How do we know this ancient threat is real? How do we know you're not just trying to manipulate us into some kind of trap?" "Because," Kethvar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, 3 days ago, long-range sensors detected massive space-time distortions at the edge of our galaxy. Something enormous is moving through the void between galaxies, heading directly toward us. My calculations suggest it will arrive within 2 years. The room went completely quiet. Even the soft hum of the ship's life support systems seemed to fade into the background. Peterson was the first to break the silence. 2 years to prepare for something that's been planning this for thousands of years. 2 years to do what no civilization in galactic history has ever managed to accomplish. Kethvar agreed. 2 years to build a defense force capable of fighting an enemy that possesses the combined knowledge and technology of every species it has ever conquered. Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. "So what's the actual plan? How do we use our supposed unpredictability against something with the resources of multiple galaxies?" "We do what your species does better than any other civilization I have ever encountered. We make the rules of engagement so chaotic and unpredictable that even perfect knowledge of galactic military history becomes meaningless." Dr. Peterson looked up from his calculations. You're talking about asymmetric warfare on a scale that's never been attempted before. I am talking about introducing so many variables into the conflict that the ancient enemy's predictive capabilities become worthless, Kethvar corrected. And for that kind of campaign, we will need every ally we can gather, every resource we can acquire, and every unconventional tactic your species can develop. Jake stood up and walked to the room's single window. Outside, stars moved slowly past as the Endeavor continued toward its destination. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was moving toward their galaxy with the power to destroy everything they had ever known. If we do this, he said without turning around, there's no going back. We'll be committing humanity to a war that could destroy us. Captain, Kethvar replied, if we do not do this, there will be no humanity left to worry about. Jake turned back to face the alien hunter. The creature's 6 eyes watched him with patient intensity, waiting for a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Collins, escort our guest to temporary quarters. Make sure he has everything he needs, but keep a security detail posted. Yes, sir. As Kethvar stood to leave, he paused at the doorway. Captain Morrison, you have 48 hours to verify the information I have provided. After that, I will need your answer. And if we say no, then I will continue hunting alone. And when the ancient enemy arrives, it will face a divided galaxy instead of a united one. The outcome of that scenario is quite predictable. After the alien left, Jake remained standing by the window, staring out at the stars. Rodriguez moved to stand beside him. What are you thinking, Jake? I'm thinking. 3 weeks later, Captain Jake Morrison found himself standing in the main hangar bay of the Endeavor, watching Kethvar carefully take apart a captured Hive interceptor ship. The Zephyrian hunter worked with surgical precision, his 4 arms, moving in perfect coordination as he exposed the craft's internal systems. Each movement was calculated and efficient, like watching a master surgeon perform a complex operation. The biomechanical integration is far more advanced than your previous. Intelligence reports suggested, Kethvar reported to the team gathered around the work area. Marine Captain Steve Parker and his squad watched in fascination as the alien hunter revealed the ship's neural network. This vessel was grown rather than constructed. The pilot interface connects directly into the pilot's nervous system. Dr. Carl Peterson ran his medical scanner over the exposed components, frowning at the readings. That should be impossible. The neural feedback from a direct connection would kill most organic life forms within minutes of activation. Unless the pilots are not entirely organic, Kethvar replied calmly. I have dissected 14 different Hive craft over the past year. Each one shows increasing levels of technological sophistication that suggests outside assistance and guidance. Commander Amy Rodriguez studied the twisted neural interface cables with obvious disgust. You're saying someone is upgrading their technology? Someone with access to biomechanical engineering that surpasses anything currently available to galactic civilization. Kethavar's secondary hands continued their delicate work, while his primary hands gestured toward a series of crystalline components embedded in the craft's hull. These processing cores utilize quantum entanglement communication systems. The Hive should not possess this level of technology. Lieutenant Kelly Murphy, the ship's intelligence officer, looked up from her data tablet. Our verification of the information you provided has been completed. All 17 staging areas were confirmed to exist exactly where you said they would be. 2 of the council members you identified have been quietly removed from positions with access to sensitive information. Kethvar's acknowledgement was a simple nod of his massive head. The 3rd council member remains in his position. He may prove useful for feeding false information to the enemy when the proper time comes. Jake approached the dissection area, careful not to disturb the hunter's work. Any progress on identifying this puppet master of yours? I have observations, but not yet concrete proof. Kethvar paused his work and focused all 6 eyes on the captain. The technological upgrades I have observed follow patterns that are consistent with pre-spaceflight Zephyrian engineering designs, but scaled far beyond anything my species ever achieved. The biomechanical integration techniques resemble methods once used by the extinct Vorthak Empire, but again, far more advanced than the originals. Marine Sergeant Danny Torres, who had been silently observing the dissection, spoke up. Sounds like someone's been collecting the greatest hits from galactic civilizations throughout history. An astute observation, Kethvar agreed, his mandibles clicking with approval, which suggests an entity with both extensive historical knowledge and the technological capability to improve upon existing designs from multiple species. Dr. Peterson set down his medical scanner and pulled up additional data on his tablet. Could we be looking at some kind of artificial intelligence? Something that's been observing and learning from galactic civilizations for thousands of years? Possible, but I believe unlikely. The strategic patterns I have observed suggest biological, thinking processes, specifically predatory behavior patterns. This entity appears to enjoy the process of hunting as much as it enjoys the actual kill. The hangar bay's communication system suddenly crackled to life with an urgent message. Captain Morrison to Hangar Bay Alpha immediately. Priority transmission. Incoming from Earth Command. Jake tapped his communication badge. On my way to the bridge. When the command crew assembled on the bridge 15 minutes later, Admiral Helen Grant's stern face appeared on the main viewing screen. Her expression was grimmer than usual, which immediately put everyone on edge. Captain Morrison, I am ordering the Endeavor to return to Earth immediately. We have received intelligence suggesting that a major hive offensive operation is being planned against our core systems within the next few months. Admiral, Commander Rodriguez interjected. Our Zephyrian ally believes that the hive threat is actually secondary to a much larger and more dangerous enemy. Admiral Grant's eyes narrowed as she studied Rodriguez through the screen. Your alien ally, Captain Morrison, I certainly hope you have not compromised operational security by sharing classified information with a foreign operative. Kethvar stepped into the viewing range of the screen's camera, causing several bridge officers to instinctively reach for their sidearms. His massive form dominated the screen as he addressed the Admiral directly. Admiral Grant, I am Kethvar of the Zephyrian Hunting Caste. I have already provided your intelligence services with actionable information regarding hive operations and staging areas. I can provide similar assistance regarding the current threat to your home world. And what would you want in return for this assistance? Your species' full cooperation in preparing for a threat that will make the hive look like a minor inconvenience. Admiral Grant studied the alien hunter for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Very well, Captain Morrison, you are authorized to bring your consultant to Earth for a complete briefing with our Strategic Planning Committee. But, Captain? Yes, Admiral? If this situation goes badly, your career will be the first casualty. As the transmission ended, Kethvar turned to face Captain Morrison. Your Admiral demonstrates wisdom in her caution. She understands that desperate times require unconventional allies. Jake looked at the alien who had somehow become humanity's newest and most dangerous partner. Let's hope we're desperate enough to survive what's coming our way. The journey to Earth took 5 days at maximum warp speed. During that time, Jake found himself spending more time with Kethvar, trying to understand both the alien and the threat they were preparing to face. The hunter was surprisingly willing to share information about Zephyrian culture and his own experiences across the galaxy. Your species fascinates me, Kethvar admitted during one of their conversations in the ship's observation lounge. In 3,000 years of hunting, I have encountered hundreds of different civilizations. Most follow predictable patterns of development and behavior. You do not. What makes us different? Most species develop either logical thinking or emotional reasoning, but rarely both simultaneously. Those that do achieve both usually sacrifice tactical flexibility for philosophical consistency. Humanity possesses logical thinking, emotional reasoning, and tactical adaptability all at the same time. Jake sipped his coffee and watched the stars streak past the window as they traveled at faster-than-light speed. Is that why this ancient enemy is so concerned about us? Partly. But there is something else. Your species has a quality that I have observed in very few civilizations throughout galactic history. When faced with impossible odds, instead of accepting defeat, you become more creative, more determined, more willing to attempt solutions that logic would suggest are hopeless. Stubborn, you mean? Kethvar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Stubborn? Yes, but also adaptable in ways that make you extremely difficult to predict or counter. This ancient enemy has succeeded for millennia because it can anticipate how its opponents will respond to various threats and challenges. But it can't predict us. Exactly. And that unpredictability may be the key to stopping something that has never been stopped before. When they finally arrived at Earth, Jake was amazed by the reception they received. Instead of the single escort ship he had expected, they found themselves surrounded by an entire fleet of human vessels. The orbital, defense platforms were clearly on high alert, and military traffic around Earth was heavier than he had ever seen. It appears your leadership has taken my warning seriously, Kethvar observed as they approached the main space station. The docking procedure took longer than usual due to additional security protocols. When they finally disembarked, Jake and his team found themselves escorted by a full platoon of Marines to a secure conference facility deep within the station's military section. The briefing room they entered was larger than Jake had expected, filled with some of the most senior officers in the human military. General Frank Davis, the head of Earth's armed forces, sat at the head of a long table. Admiral Grant was there, along with Colonel Nina White from Special Operations and at least a dozen other high-ranking officials. Gentlemen, ladies, General. Davis began as Jake and Kethvar took their seats. We are here to discuss what may be the most serious threat humanity has ever faced. Our alien ally has provided us with intelligence suggesting that the hive attacks we have been fighting are merely preliminary operations for something much worse. Dr. Martha Hill, Earth's chief xenobiologist, activated a holographic display showing recent deep space sensor readings. Long-range sensors have confirmed unusual energy signatures at the edge of our galaxy. Something massive is moving through. The void between galaxies and its trajectory suggests it is heading directly toward us. Kethvar. The strategy session in Earth Command's most secure briefing room brought together humanity's best military minds and their most unlikely ally. General Frank Davis sat at the head of the long conference table, surrounded by Admiral Helen Grant, Colonel Nina White, Captain Jake Morrison, and a dozen other senior officers. At the center of it all stood Kethvar, his massive form dominating the room as he manipulated the holographic display with his 4 hands. The entity I have been tracking calls itself the Architect, Kethvar began, adjusting the hologram to show a complex star chart that spanned multiple galaxies. For approximately 50,000 years, it has been systematically destroying galactic civilizations, stealing their technology and knowledge, and preventing any single species from becoming too powerful to threaten its control over the galaxy. Jake Morrison, now serving as the primary liaison between Kethvar and Earth Command, highlighted several points on the glowing display. The pattern becomes clear when you examine the long-term historical data. Every time a species develops faster-than-light travel, advanced artificial intelligence, or begins expanding aggressively beyond their home systems, they encounter sudden and devastating setbacks. General Davis leaned forward in his chair, studying the data streams flowing across the holographic display. Setbacks like the hive attacks? The hive is merely one tool among many that the Architect has created, Kethvar replied, his 6 eyes tracking the faces around the room. Engineered plagues that target specific genetic markers, sudden depletion of natural resources, civil wars that tear civilizations apart from within. technological disasters that set species back by centuries. All attributed to natural causes or internal conflicts. The architect prefers subtle manipulation to direct confrontation. Dr. Martha Hill, Earth's chief xenobiologist, studied the flowing data streams with growing alarm. You're describing a cosmic gardener, pruning civilizations to prevent them from growing too large or too powerful. An excellent metaphor, Dr. Hill. However, humanity's rapid adaptation and unconventional tactical thinking has disrupted the architect's carefully planned timeline. Your species was supposed to be eliminated during your first contact with the Galactic Council, victims of cultural shock and technological overwhelm. Admiral Grant activated her personal data tablet and began cross-referencing the information with Earth's own intelligence databases. Instead, we adapted and thrived in the galactic community. More than simply thrived. Your rapid integration of captured hive technology, your ability to think tactically on multiple levels simultaneously, your natural tendency to form alliances with other species rather than dominating them, all of this suggests a level of adaptability that directly threatens the architect's control. Colonel White, head of Earth's Special Operations Command, asked the question that everyone in the room was thinking. So where exactly is this architect? What are we actually going to be fighting? Kethvar manipulated the holographic display again, showing a dark region of space far beyond the rim of their galaxy. Long-range sensor data suggests a massive artificial construct in the empty void between galaxies. The energy signature is consistent with technology from at least a dozen different extinct civilizations. A composite entity, Dr. Hill realized, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It's not just using their technology, it has actually become them. My investigation suggests that the architect was originally a single biological entity, but it has been incorporating the consciousness and accumulated knowledge of every species. It has defeated into its own being for thousands of years. It now possesses the collective intelligence and technological capabilities of every civilization it has ever destroyed. The room fell completely silent as the full implications of what Kethvar was saying became clear. Lieutenant Commander Gary Watson, Earth's Chief Strategic Planning Officer, was the first to break the silence. What kind of military forces are we looking at? Unknown in exact numbers, but certainly substantial. The recent acceleration of hive attacks suggests that the architect is preparing for direct intervention in galactic affairs. My calculations suggest we have perhaps 18 months before it physically arrives in this galaxy. General Davis stood up and began pacing behind his chair, a habit Jake had noticed whenever the general was thinking through complex problems. 18 months to prepare for something that has been planning this campaign for 50,000 years. General, with all due respect, Jake interjected, Kethvar didn't come to us because we're the strongest military force in the galaxy. He came to us because we're the most unpredictable force in the galaxy. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what the humans had learned was a sign of approval and agreement. Captain Morrison is absolutely correct. The architect's primary advantage lies in its ability to predict and counter conventional military strategies. It has observed and successfully defeated every type of warfare that galactic civilization has developed over thousands of years. Except ours, Admiral Grant realized, looking up from her data tablet. Human tactical thinking incorporates elements that the architect has never encountered in 50,000 years of galactic manipulation. Improvisation based on incomplete information, emotional reasoning that leads to unexpected decisions, and, most importantly, the ability to find opportunity and advantage in chaos and confusion. These factors make your species uniquely dangerous to an entity that has always relied on predictability. Colonel White leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. So, what's the actual plan? How do we use our supposed unpredictability against something with the accumulated resources and knowledge of an entire galaxy? Kethavar manipulated the holographic display once more, showing current troop movements and fleet positions across human-controlled space. We do what your species does better than any other civilization I have encountered in 3,000 years of hunting. We make the rules of military engagement so chaotic and unpredictable that even perfect knowledge of galactic military history becomes completely meaningless. Dr. Hill looked up from her extensive notes. You're talking about asymmetric warfare on a galactic scale. I am talking about introducing so many variables into every equation that the architect's predictive capabilities become worthless, Kethavar corrected. And for that kind of campaign, we will need every ally we can possibly gather, every available resource we can acquire, and every unconventional tactic your species can possibly devise. General Davis returned to his seat and stared at the holographic display for a long moment. What kind of allies are we talking about? The Galactic Council is already suspicious of human expansion and military capabilities. Not the Council, Kethavar replied. The outcasts, the rebels, the species that the Council has abandoned or forgotten. The Rigelian smugglers who know every secret route through unexplored space. The Andromedan refugees who lost their homeworld to hive attacks, but still remember their advanced technology. The serious mining consortiums who have access to rare materials that don't appear in any official database. Jake studied the display, beginning to understand the scope of what Kethavar was proposing. You're talking about building a shadow alliance of every group that has a reason to oppose the established galactic order. I am talking about uniting every force in the galaxy that refuses to be controlled or eliminated. The architect has spent 50,000 years ensuring that such alliances never form. It has kept species isolated, suspicious of each other, and focused on local conflicts rather than galactic threats. Colonel White activated her own data terminal and began pulling up intelligence files. What makes you think these groups would be willing to work together? Most of them have been fighting each other for decades. Because they all face the same ultimate fate if the architect succeeds. Total elimination or absorption into its collective consciousness. When faced with extinction, even ancient enemies can find common ground. Admiral Grant looked around the room at her fellow officers. This is beyond anything we've ever attempted. We're talking about coordinating military operations with groups that most galactic governments consider to be criminals or terrorists. We are talking about survival, Kethavar said simply. The architect has never faced unified resistance before. It has always been able to defeat its enemies by keeping them divided and fighting each other instead of the real threat. Dr. Hill closed her data tablet and looked directly at the alien hunter. What makes you so certain that this plan will work? What makes you think we can succeed where 50,000 years of galactic civilization has failed? Because for the first time in galactic history, the architect is afraid, Kethavar replied. The acceleration of its timeline, the increased aggression of the hive attacks, the pressure on the Council to restrict human expansion, these are all signs of an entity that is no longer confident in its ability to control events. Jake stood up and walked to the room's single window, looking out at the traffic of ships moving around Earth's orbital facilities. If we do this, there's no going back. We'll be committing not just humanity, but potentially dozens of other species to a war that could destroy everything we've ever known. Captain Morrison, Kethavar said quietly, if we do not do this, there will be nothing left to know and no one lud. 6 months later, the combined human-Zephyrian task force had grown into something that had never existed before in galactic history. The command ship, UES Defiance, a hybrid vessel that incorporated both human engineering and Zephyrian hunting technology, served as the mobile headquarters for what they had named Operation Chaos Theory. The ship moved through space like a predator, its hull covered in adaptive armor that could change color and texture to match its surroundings. Admiral Jake Morrison, recently promoted from his position as captain, stood in the ship's main war room alongside Kethavar, studying real-time tactical displays from across human space and beyond. The past months had transformed their unlikely partnership into something that resembled friendship, though Jake suspected that for a Zephyrian hunter, friendship might look very similar to mutual respect between fellow predators. The Hive's attack patterns have become increasingly desperate and disorganized, reported Commander Lisa Taylor, their new intelligence chief. Her station was surrounded by screens showing fleet movements across dozens of star systems. It appears as though they are being forced to accelerate their operations far beyond their optimal strategic parameters. Kethvar's advanced thermal sensors tracked the heat signatures of every person in the command center as he processed the incoming data. The architect grows impatient with the slow progress of its servants. It has begun taking direct control of Hive operations, sacrificing long-term efficiency for short-term speed. Admiral Morrison highlighted several star systems on the main tactical display, which creates opportunities for us to exploit. Major Alex Carter, what is the current status of our Trojan Horse initiative? A lean woman in modified marine armor stepped forward from her position near the communications array. All 17 stealth teams are in position and ready for activation, sir. We have successfully infiltrated Hive staging areas in the Centauri system, Wolf 359, and the Vega colonies. When the architect finally makes its direct move, we will have assets positioned behind enemy lines. And what about our unconventional allies? Captain Ruth Morgan, recently assigned as diplomatic liaison to the various rebel groups and outcasts they had recruited, consulted the data on her portable tablet. The Rigelian smugglers are providing completely untraceable supply lines for weapons and ammunition. The Andromedan refugees are sharing their advanced technology and intelligence about architect capabilities. The Sirius mining consortiums are manufacturing specialized ammunition using non-standard materials that will not show up on conventional sensor sweeps. Dr. Patricia Adams, the task force's chief scientist, looked up from her research station where she had been analyzing captured architect technology. Admiral, I believe I have finally identified the primary reason why the architect finds humanity so unpredictable and dangerous. Most galactic species develop along predictable evolutionary paths. They become either purely logical in their thinking, like the Vuloid Republic, or purely instinctual, like the Hive swarms. Humans somehow incorporate both simultaneously, plus emotional reasoning and creative lateral thinking. Kethvar used his secondary hands to manipulate a complex probability matrix displayed on one of the wall screens. Dr. Adams has identified the correct pattern. I have been analyzing human battle tactics and strategic decisions for 8 months now. Even I cannot consistently predict your choices in combat situations, and prediction of prey behavior is fundamental to my hunting methodology. Which means what exactly? Admiral Morrison asked. Which means that when the architect arrives and attempts to calculate optimal countermeasures to human military doctrine, it will fail completely. Your species does not have military doctrine in any conventional sense that can be analyzed and countered. Commander Taylor activated the long-range sensor array and began scanning the edge of galactic space. Speaking of the architect's arrival, we are detecting massive space-time distortions at the galactic rim. Whatever is coming toward us is enormous beyond anything in our databases. The main display screen shifted to show deep space sensor readings. Energy signatures, unlike anything they had ever recorded, painted abstract patterns of light and darkness across the screen. The readings were so alien that the ship's computers could not even begin to classify what they were detecting. Estimated. Time until arrival? Morrison asked. Based on current approach vector and velocity calculations, approximately 6 weeks. Kethvar's 6 eyes focused on the display with the intense concentration of a predator that had finally sighted its ultimate prey. 50,000 years of careful planning and manipulation, and it all comes down to this moment. Admiral Morrison activated the fleet-wide communication system that connected every ship, station, and outpost in their growing alliance. All vessels, all stations, This is Admiral Morrison. Operation Chaos Theory is now fully active. You all know your assignments, and you all understand what is at stake here. We are about to face something that has successfully destroyed every military force in galactic history. He paused and looked around the command center at humans and aliens working side by side in preparation for the greatest battle any of them had ever imagined. But this ancient enemy has never faced anything like us before. We are going to be unpredictable, we are going to be chaotic, and we are going to be absolutely relentless in our resistance. The galaxy's deadliest hunter has joined Team Humanity, and together, we are going to show this architect what happens when the hunters become the hunted. As alert alarms began sounding across the ship, signaling the beginning of humanity's greatest military challenge, Kethavar turned to face his human partner and ally. Admiral Morrison, in my 3,000 years of hunting across the galaxy, I have always worked alone. Being part of a pack, as you might call it, is a completely new experience for me. It is quite interesting. Morrison smiled grimly as the tactical displays around them lit up with incoming contact warnings and threat assessments. Welcome to humanity, Kethavar. We have always specialized in making things interesting. The ancient enemy was finally coming. But for the first time, in 50,000 years of galactic domination, it would face a military force that could not be predicted, could not be outmaneuvered using conventional tactics, and absolutely refused to be eliminated or controlled. The architect had spent millennia ensuring that no species would ever develop the capability to threaten its rule. It had carefully pruned every civilization that showed potential for real resistance. It had manipulated galactic politics to keep species divided and suspicious of each other. It had used tools like the Hive to weaken potential threats before they could become dangerous. But humanity had slipped through every trap, survived every test, and formed alliances that should have been impossible. Now, with the galaxy's most effective hunter as their guide and ally, they were about to attempt something that had never been tried before in galactic history. They were going to fight back. The massive sensor array detected another wave of space-time distortions, this time much closer to their galaxy. Whatever the architect truly was, it was no longer hiding in the void between galaxies. It was coming to finish what it had started 50,000 years ago, but it would find a galaxy very different from the one it expected to conquer. Major Carter activated her communication link to the stealth teams positioned throughout Hive space. Captain Morgan sent coded messages to smugglers, refugees, and mining crews scattered across dozens of star systems. Dr. Adams began the final preparations for weapons that had been designed specifically to counter architect technology, and at the center of it all, a human admiral and a Zephyrian hunter prepared to lead the most unlikely alliance in galactic history against an enemy that had never known defeat. The hunt was about to begin in earnest, and this time, humanity and its deadliest ally would be the ones setting the rules of engagement. In the vast darkness of space, ancient intelligence stirred with something it had not felt in 50,000 years of easy victories. For the first time since it had begun its campaign of galactic domination, the architect was no longer certain of success. The galaxy's most unpredictable species had found the galaxy's most effective hunter, and together they had built something that should not have been possible. They had built hope. The final battle for the future of galactic civilization was about to begin, and the outcome was no longer predictable.